Okay, Chair, we're live and ready to start the meeting.
Okay, wonderful. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's Transport for the Rail North Committee consultation call. Obviously, we're holding this virtually, and I hope kind of everyone, wherever you are across the north of England or beyond, are all safe and well, and equally kind of warm welcome to everyone that may be watching the live stream, wherever they happen to be as well. Have we had any apologies for absence that we need to inform David or James?
Yeah, I can read through the ones we've had. We've had Councillor Martin Gannon, but we have Mayor Jamie Driscoll from the North East. We've had apologies from both Councillor Rob Waltham and Richard Hannigan of the South Humber authorities, Councillor Craig Brown of Cheshire and Potteries, and Councillor Louise Gittins.
Wonderful, thanks very much. Are there any other apologies anyone else wants to tender? I'm not seeing any digital hands, so I'll take that as read. Obviously, the next item is declaration of interest, so that's just for me to remind all members that if there's any personal prejudicial or disclosable pecuniary interest that you know of either now or might crop up at some point during the debate and discussions, please don't hesitate to inform us accordingly so it can be recorded and dealt with in an appropriate fashion. Then, if we can move on to the third item, because I'm not seeing any indications of any interests, is the minutes of the previous meeting, and that's obviously to gain agreement that the minutes are an accurate record of the previous meeting that we had. I know it's been raised about the attendees not kind of fully reflecting those that were able to attend and those that weren't, David, so can we... David and James, can we reflect that accordingly and amend appropriately?
We'll amend that. I know there's Mayor Driscoll, Councillor Hannigan need adding. We'll do that. And I think, Chair, the minutes are just for noting this time because it's a consultation call rather than formal approval.
Wonderful. That's absolutely great. Okay, if we move into the detailed items then, and the first report we've got is Rail Reform Next Steps, and I think David is going to take us through this for about 10 minutes. So, David, can I hand over to yourself?
Yep, certainly. I'll just get the notes. Right, so I won't dwell on this too long, but basically the format here is pointing out that originally at TFN board back in September, we agreed what we called the pillars for our response to the William Shapps plan would be. And the pillars are very much based on TFN's own abilities, our own sort of attributes as an organisation. So when we said for Pillar 1 we wanted to be a strategic partner for Great British Railways, that's sort of based on the democratic legitimacy we have in helping to make decisions, and also our abilities through the skills and knowledge of the modelling and economics team. Pillar 2, about being lead on multimodal strategy across the north, reflecting the fact that we're the only people in that space of looking at all modes of transport across the north. Pillar 3, about our data and strategic insights that arise from the tools we've developed. And Pillar 4, on the basis of our relationships with all the local transport authorities, mayoral combined authorities, and so on. But now we needed to move more into the practicalities of how we're actually going to achieve that. And most importantly, the very first thing that's on the agenda with that is the whole industry strategic plan, which the Great British Railways transition team has called for evidence for, and we haven't got a very long window for that. They're wanting things back by the 4th of February. So what we're planning to do is take a paper to TFN board on the 25th of January, explaining what our response is going to be. I mean, in the whole industry strategic plan call for evidence, it's quite structured in terms of what has been asked for, and it's about translating our policies and evidence we've already got into that format to clearly show what TFN's position is with regard to those questions. But with then informing our longer term collaboration with the GBR transition team, we've developed 5 themes, which is like more specifically what we want to do. So theme A is a joint strategic transport plan, and ideally what we envisage there is that the northern element of the GBR whole industry strategic plan will be very similar, almost interchangeable really, with the rail element of Transport for the North strategic transport plan, because they'll both be looking at the same period of time, 30-year period, and dealing with similar issues such as decarbonisation, wider economic impacts and so on. So that's theme A. Theme B is stressing the outcomes that we want from transport investments, so not just the outputs of a certain number of trains per hour between A and B, but what sort of impact we want that to have on local economy, social inclusion, labour market agglomerations and so on. Theme C is prioritising a pipeline of investment. Again, that's something that really only TfN can do, of a multimodal pipeline of investment, saying what it is we want in what order, what are our most valuable interventions that we want to see. Theme D is the idea of double devolution, so there'll be operational devolution within the regions of GBR at the same time as we have more devolution to city regions and unitary authorities and so on. In particular there, looking at how they collaborate with each other and reminding you that TfN's policy is still that we'd like to see a northern route within GBR, but that doesn't seem to be on their agenda at the moment, but that's an issue that will come up again. And then finally, Theme E is an attempt to come up with better metrics, really. We're talking about what we're calling a profit and loss account for the North, which will look at what we're getting as compared to ideally what we'd like, and looking at all the wider impacts of investments on the environment, the economy, social inclusion, and so on. And so we wanted to develop a better way of monitoring how investment in the region is actually going. And so this paper really is to ask for endorsement that these are the 5 themes that we want to take, first of all, into our response to the whole industry strategic plan, and then into our wider collaboration with GBR in future.
Excellent. Thanks very much, David. That's really useful. Are there any questions or comments anyone wants to raise at this stage? Not seeing any digital hands, so I'll just sort of say I kind of strongly endorse the report and look forward to it going back up to the board. Particularly strongly kind of welcome and support that kind of deeper discussions with all the kind of mayoral combined authorities and other authorities across the north of England on that double devolution principle. We know that that's something kind of that's worked really well in places like the Town and Wear Metro and with Merseyrail. I know there's large parts of the north that would like to kind of have an even more devolved settlement, so more to the north, but certainly more to a kind of local level as well. I've got both Jamie and Susan indicating, so Jamie, shall I bring you in first?
Thanks very much, then. Just to echo your points there, actually, that particularly on that principle of double devolution, empowering city regions, but to let those who aren't Metro mayors also know that, for example, we are working with Cumbria on the Carlisle to Newcastle railway. So double devolution works for everybody. It's not just a power grab by mayors. And on point E, this point about a profit and loss approach, we've said many times, I've sat on many panels and said, we are not afraid of accountability. We want accountability because we're close to the action. We can make better decisions. So let's take that approach.
Here, absolutely, Jamie. Susan?
Yeah, similar, Chair, really welcome the paper and welcome the opportunity to get more devolution on rail to the regions. I think it's a really important step forward. Just encourage TfN and government, actually, Network Rail, to look at how somewhere like Yorkshire works as a region, because obviously we're not homogenous. We're not just coterminous with all our boundaries. We're codependent all parts of Yorkshire. So it'd be interesting to see how the model also works. You see it working in Yorkshire as well. I'll just put that in. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. David, do you want to come back? You've just indicated.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to kind of respond to that point, really. One of the other things in the paper that we've pointed out is we have got the benefit of the Rail North Partnership in the north. Now, that doesn't give us full devolution that we aspire to, but it is a strong building block. The indications are that Great British Railways wants to build on those type of partnerships. Within the partnership, we have the provision for some further devolution through the business unit model. That's what we want to explore specifically with individual regions, and that doesn't have to be just the city regions. We'll look at what works best in each geography, but I think that would give us a good step forward, maybe as phase one of that further and double devolution. So we want to really use that power that we already have alongside. I think we also refer in the paper to the powers that we have around fares and ticketing, which we think we could use to support the rollout of pay-as-you-go ticketing, which is now clearly a national scheme that's been taken forward.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you, David. So are we happy to agree the recommendations in that report? Oh, Martin, you want to come in?
I just wanted to just add to what David said, Chair, by just making the point to the committee that we're obviously making sure we keep track of progress in the legislative framework that's going to be taken through Parliament to establish Great British Railways. And I think one of the benefits of this work we're doing as TFN is we can actually feed into and make sure that the and advise how the legislative framework needs to work, but equally make sure it builds upon what exists at the moment. But we'll keep the committee cited on that as that moves forward in the new year.
Thanks, Martin. That's really useful as well. So if we're happy to agree to all the recommendations in that report, I'm not seeing any dissent, so I shall take that as read that we can agree. And then move on to the fifth item, which is the Rail North Partnership operational update. We're going to take about 30 minutes for this, and Gary's going to introduce it, but we're also going to have very brief updates from Graham from TransPennine Express, Mark from Northern, and hopefully someone from Network Rail as well. Gary will be able to kind of confirm whether we've got anyone from Network Rail. So Gary, if I can bring you in, and then if you want to sort of then introduce each of the partners from the operating community, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Liam. So I'll take the report pretty much as read. I guess almost moving up a layer from it, it's a continuation of what we saw last time. Our growth, the return of patronage in the north is well ahead of the national average for both of our operators. We've been through autumn, we've not seen the same sorts of levels of disruption that we've encountered in the past, so that we're really pretty happy sitting opposite the talks that they are exercising that stewardship of the returning demand in the network in the way that we would expect to see. We certainly had some recent performance dips due to autumn. That's near inevitable. I think there are one or two lessons learned or lessons to be learned that the operators or Network Rail can highlight for us. Big achievements in the period, that transfer that you'll see in the report of Neville Hill Maintenance Depot, I think that will feature quite strongly in Northern's business plan for the coming year. It's been spotted as a location where a fair amount of investment in both infrastructure and processes will be needed to make that a kind of truly modern undertaking that will support performance rather than being something that needs an awful lot of care and attention on a daily basis at the moment. Still seeing headwinds, I guess, in driver and crew training due to the lag that still existed from the long-term COVID prevention of training. Again, the operators can give you more detail on that, but I would note that just this week we're seeing from a couple of locations with the impact of Omicron that something that we thought we were getting to the point of putting behind us is likely to continue for quite some time as the folks work out how best to address that. And as it says in the paper, and we'll come on to, we've been working with the two operators in terms of their service agreements and follow-on contracts and business plans to ensure that we get that continuity. TransPennine Express, I think all good news in terms of how they've been working with us under the direct award, how the service quality regime has been prepared and launched, and probably in cross-country and Avanti, I'll refer to the paper according to its terms. They're not operators I'm just as close to. But again, I think the general growth build back until very recently in passenger numbers and preservation of good levels of performance that we've seen across COVID. I think I said this last time, I guess I would repeat it again. We can still see that in the north, the timetable does have its fragilities, which points still to the importance of pushing on with the Manchester Recovery Task Force outputs and also continuing to have that close view on where the East Coast Main Line timetable ends up, so that we're not inadvertently introducing any new sources of delay or performance challenge. Good news on the Boxing Day service updates, just working through the last of what that service will look like in cost between Liverpool, Lime Street and St Helens. May 22 timetable, again, I think we've worked through your officers to highlight what it is that is anticipated to take place in May 22, and we just need to tie that together with the last of the business planning work to ensure that we're all joined up. Deck 22 a little bit further off, but some coverage in that as well, which we can go into as need be. And Manchester Recovery Task Force update. I think we've all seen the launch of the second consultation. Good news in that Northern and TP have a mirror consultation going on there, so we're avoiding that issues that we had on the East Coast with various operators and part and parcel consultations that one had to read their way through to get the whole picture. We've certainly avoided that around Manchester. And the headlines and performance, I guess I'll invite you to read as they are. As I say, just a general holding up of performance, but a kind of underlying fragility still between levels of training the operators have been able to undertake, levels of breaking in of the new fleets that they've had in the real world with as we've had the COVID timetable restriction, and one or two issues over autumn, particularly around leaf fall. And I'm not sure, David, if we do have someone from Network Rail on the call, but we'll maybe ask them to comment a little on the experience of the
Network Rail are due at 11:30, Gary.
Right. So I think there's something to hear from them on the experience of the leaf fall train, which cleans the rail heads and makes sure that the operation of the two talks doesn't run foul of contamination of the line head. And there were some issues around that this time, which will be a lesson learned takeaway. So overall, I guess summing up, another solid period of performance, a better autumn probably than we've had in a while, and still some stuff to look out for as we work forward into the new timetables that we anticipate in May of next year and December of next year. I think that as we come together, actually, it's just that we had the launch of the timetable last weekend, and I'm not aware of any particular issues having arisen from the timetable itself, as opposed to some issues which you may wish to explore around the current output of the two operators around the timetable, against the background of a couple of issues that have arisen on availability of staff on Sundays for rest day working in the West, supporting Sunday services in the West, and for TPE, some issues at the moment around availability of staff to support the timetable over Christmas and New Year. Probably I would, David, hand over to Graham and Northern in turn to let them give us a bit more around that rather than purport to steal their thunder or grab their expertise.
I think it's Darren Higgins we've got from TransPennine. If we go to him first, perhaps.
Sorry, Darren.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Gary. Good morning, everyone. I'm Darren Higgins. I'm the Commercial Director for TransPennine. Along with Mark, I attended this committee meeting in March, I think it was, and gave members an update on some of the things we were doing at that time around reassurance and building customer confidence. I can give a quick update on where we are with our recovery. I can also just touch on recent events in terms of what we're seeing in response to the spread of the new Omicron variant. So at the end of period 9, which closed on Saturday just gone, we were at 72% of the pre-COVID benchmark. So this is effectively comparing the latest 4-week period back to the same reporting period 2 years ago. As Gary said, generally TPE has performed ahead of both the UK rail and long distance sector benchmarks in recent months. I think it's important to note actually period 9, the severe impact of weather, particularly Storm Arwen, but also the emergence of Omicron in the second half of the period. Unsurprisingly, this 72% figure varies significantly by journey purpose. Leisure remains by far the best performing segment, with overall leisure travel recovering back to 89%. Breaking this down further, Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays are back to pre-pandemic levels, and we are seeing a number of very busy services at weekends across all of our 3 routes. Short distance leisure trips, for example, those trips that are less than 50 miles, Christmas shopping trips at this time of the year, visiting friends and family, attending music events, they've been performing really, really strongly up until recent days. The only downward pressure on leisure really at the moment is the Manchester airport market, which up until very recently was back to 40% of pre-COVID levels, and obviously that's due to some of the uncertainty around flight restrictions. So by and large, a really, really good news story for the leisure recovery. Commuter and business is on a slightly different recovery trajectory. Both segments have grown for us, but a notable feature is the pace of recovery, which has been much slower. Commuter income has recovered to around 52%, but has been largely flat for the last 3 to 4 months. There has been some take up in new products, for example, the Flexi Season product. But by and large, commuter travel is being impacted by the hybrid or working from home practices adopted by a lot of employers right now. And business travel is obviously a little bit further behind at 40% of where it was 2 years ago. And up until Omicron, we weren't expecting that to change that materially until the new year. I should just note as well, timetable changes compared to 2 years ago. So in period 9, 2 years ago, we were running 5 trains an hour. In period 9 this year, we ran 3. And from this period, we've got 4 in the timetable. So the general point I'm making here is that many of the services that we were running up until recent weeks were as busy, if not busier, than 2 years ago. So just on really to the most recent days, it is much quieter this week. Monday and Tuesday were 15% down compared to the same day last week. So no doubt a combination of the announcement on Sunday evening. But as Gary mentioned, we're also facing some challenges at the moment around service delivery in relation to industrial relations issues. So that is impacting, and we're doing everything at the moment to communicate to customers. We've emailed over 70,000 customers this week, just making them aware of possible disruption this week and into the Christmas period. And we've got customer handling plans in place across our network for the foreseeable future. So I can stop there and take any questions.
What I was going to suggest, Darren, just to keep it timely, if we want to allow kind of Mark to give the update from Northern, and then we can bring sort of members in, because some of the kind of issues that different operators might want to kind of raise are kind of collective, if you like. I know Don's indicating, but if it'd be sort of more efficient if we can ask Mark to do his update, and then we can bring Don and others in, if that's okay. So,
no problem at all.
Mark, are you able to give us the update from Northern? Lovely,
yeah, thank you, Chair. Really just building on what Darren said, I won't repeat the stuff he said, and I'll try and keep it brief. But again, I think we had a really strong summer. We were really pleased with the things we told you about earlier in the year, the strong marketing, the launch of new trains, better timetables. We felt in a good position, and that came through in revenue. I think if we were having the meeting 2 weeks ago, I'd have been sitting here reporting that revenue was close to 95% of pre-COVID levels, and demand was 85%. So a really strong picture. We've been outperforming both our peer group and the large parts of the industry by circa 10%. But we must accept that it's been a leisure-led recovery. As I say, we did very strong marketing to stimulate the leisure market. In Northern, it is lots of short trips. So the daycation rather than the staycation was very strong in the summer. But we've been really impressed with how robust leisure traffic has been during the autumn period as well, and has maintained and averaging around 85%. As Darren said, a lot of focus on Fridays. Friday has become the new Saturday in many ways. The Friday, Saturday and Sunday market has been strong. Monday a little weaker, but we were starting to see some improvements in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, and we were looking forward to a very strong trajectory through to year end. But then we were hit by storms initially, and then obviously Omicron has hit us. We saw an initial 10% reduction in demand from the storms and then into the first phases. But then this week, as Darren said, we've seen a further sort of 5%. Albeit yesterday, we were still reporting demand at around circa 70% of pre-COVID, which was stronger than I think other operators have been experiencing, which I think just goes to prove that the northern leisure market is fairly robust and resilient, and we need to play on that. In terms of the return to work market, like Darren said, it's been sluggish. For us, that's flattened at around sort of 35 to 38% for the traditional season ticket market. But what we have found is that our advanced purchase market has grown significantly. And what we're finding, I think people that are travelling into the office occasionally are not going for season ticket products, but are looking for best value, and they're searching for advanced purchase because they can plan in advance. So we've seen significant growth in that area. And the market is very different dependent on the geographies that we've got. The Northeast, Sheffield, Liverpool has been stronger than, say, Manchester and Leeds, which I think reflects the sort of blue collar versus white collar market, and people that need to travel into work versus those that can travel from home. We got a lot of marketing that was planned to do during this period and also into January, which are key points in which we thought we could stimulate more return to work market. Clearly, we've put a lot of those things on ice whilst we've got the uncertainty of the latest COVID outbreak. But some of you will have seen the adverts and the marketing that we've done, and the work we've done on improving the quality of our product, which is coming through in our customer sat surveys. And we measure net promoter score as our core metric, where for those customers that have travelled post-COVID, we've got a really strong positive net promoter score. But for those customers that have maybe lapsed, that haven't travelled, in the last sort of 18 months, they've still got quite a poor rating, and we need to work hard to get those lapsed customers to travel with us and get the better experience. So that's an overview of trading. From an operational point of view, I mean, we're in a rapidly evolving situation, so it's difficult to show you trends. We have got some staff availability issues. I think that's different dependent on the depot and the geography that we're in. And so we're having to make decisions in flight as those issues emerge. We're trying to balance sort of resource against customer demand. So we're trying to protect those areas that we know traffic is going to be strong. Like TPE, we're messaging customers and trying to give customers surety of if we're going to cancel services, that they can make travel plans and have confidence then that the service will travel. Weekends, as Gary says, are a particular issue, but we have lots of our regional operational teams are very much on the case. We've got management presence around. We've got backup buses that where we can't, we'd have a sort of a plan B, and we're working really hard to make sure that we can protect services where we can. But as I say, it's a rapidly evolving situation, and it's difficult to tell you today. Have we found a balance, because it'll evolve over the coming days and weeks. I'll leave it there, Chair, if that's okay.
No, that's really useful. Thanks ever so much, Mark. I'm not sure if anyone's joined us from Network Rail yet. David, have they, or Gary? If they haven't, or if they've literally only just come through the digital doors, I won't sort of throw them straight.
I haven't seen them yet, Liam.
But that's fine. So let's move into the questions. Obviously, Don had indicated first, so I'll bring Don in, and then we've got Darren and then Heather. So Don, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree. Two very useful contributions to us this morning. First of all, Darren, I want to acknowledge, first of all, the improvements that TransPennine Express are making to the York-Scarborough line. I did attend an event with some of your employees a couple of weeks ago. We've improved and lengthened at Malton Station, and I know the rolling stock has improved greatly over recent months. So we welcome that very much in North Yorkshire. I was one of the recipients of your email last Friday informing us of union activity, and you suggested then that with effect from Saturday, you may have to cut some services. How has that actually worked out in the intervening 5 days? And I'm surprised that Transport for the North members received this news only from yourself. I had no previous indication there would be disruption to services, and we do, after all, have union membership in one of the committees of Transport for the North. So that's as far as Darren is concerned. Mark, I didn't want to lose this opportunity of thanking Northern for the doubling of services between Harrogate and York with effect from your 2021 timetable, December 2021 timetable, which started last Sunday. This is a major advantage to what is a very busy line. Many of our rail commuters have had to rely upon once an hour services, but you've now doubled that to 2 an hour in each direction, which is an enormous benefit. This was, of course, in partnership with Network Rail. We invested 10 million in track and signalling upgrades, and it was a really good example of partnership working where our rail users, our travellers, are now benefiting directly. So thank you to both of you. Thank you, Jim.
Lovely, thanks, Tom. Darren, do you want to come back in on those points, and I'll bring Darren, Heather, Andy, Jamie, and Susan in.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mackenzie, for those comments. The withdrawal of driver rest day working was a very late development, and we wanted to be as transparent and communicate with stakeholders and customers as quickly as possible. So that's what we did at the end of last week. It has had an impact on service delivery this week. The first couple of days, the PPM metric was sort of the low to mid 80s, so it is impacting on that. The thing that we want to do as an operator very quickly is make sure that we keep customers moving. We make them aware that we've got these issues. We've told customers that they can travel on the next available service. We've got cross-ticket acceptance arrangements in place with all operators across our network, including Northern. So I'd like to say thank you to Mark for the support that he's been giving us, but also at the West Coast main line with Avanti West Coast and with LNER at the East Coast main line. And like Northern, we've also got a management presence out this week. So we're very disappointed by the action. And yeah, our focus right now is just on keeping customers moving. But yeah, I mean, I'm sorry that obviously people feel that it is a surprise. That's disappointing from our point of view as well. But it was a very, very late development, and we've tried, as a business, we've tried to communicate that as quickly as we can.
Okay, thanks for that, Darren. I think just on that point, we would obviously encourage you to sort of engage in the relevant dialogue and negotiations to find an agreeable settlement to that, so we can get back to normal operation. Okay, Darren, do you want to come in from Hull?
Hi, yeah. Probably not quite as upbeat as Don in terms of, obviously, we did have a meeting with TfL and Northern regarding the what I call the winter timetable, or the COVID timetable, regarding the Hull to Bridlington route. Now, for those I'm sure most of you do know, but Bridlington is effectively Hull and East Rising seaside. Well, we used to have 3, but Beeching did for the other 2 many years ago. But so that was a very important route, and obviously we do appreciate you prioritised it in the summer, but obviously the reduction in timetables in this timetable will mean that until May, the links between Hull and its commuter towns, effectively Bridlington and Cottingham and Beverley, was down to 1 hour. Now, the only problem with that was some reliability issues you have had, and we raised at the meeting separately from this. That means it's sometimes a 2-hourly service between Hull and its commuter town. So although I do appreciate the efforts of yourselves and TfN in certainly putting the late night train back on at 11:15 for the which is effectively our nighttime economy train back to our suburbs. I am concerned by that with the latest Omicron stuff that the driver had explained to us that the issue was literally driver training and lack of staff. That was the reason that service would stay at the reduced levels till May, June. I'm just concerned that this won't, in a sense, I'm not saying be used, but we won't have further delays to that timetable because of recent developments, because we really do need that service back if we're serious about modal shifts. So I suppose I'm not happy with the timetable, I'm not, and I've explained that, but I am happy that you've made some moves towards meeting us sort of halfway. But the reassurance I sort of need really is that timetable does return back for the summer, because it's really important, but not just for the seaside, but for our commuter towns when we don't have a tram service or a bus service. Okay, Mark, thanks.
Thanks, Darren. Mark, can you respond?
Yeah, Chair, you'd like to come back. I mean, thank you for that, Councillor. I think we met with you. This was raised at the last time I came, and we had a meeting with you. It is planned in for a return in May, so it can give you some confidence on that. I think we never like removing services, but I think we go into some of the detail of what we did, why we did that, and I suppose to answer your question, I can give you confidence that from May it is back into the timetable to support that summer market.
Okay, thanks for that, Mark. That's obviously useful feedback for Darren. Heather, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. First of all, Mark, in Northern Trains, I understand for the feedback that we've got that the passenger levels are holding up very well in the Tees Valley area. I just wondered whether you could confirm that. I mean, we're very pleased about that, and that's the feedback that we're getting. Are you nodding? So you obviously agree with that.
Absolutely. I mean, as I said at the start, I think our demand has recovered faster than probably most areas of the industry, which I think reflects how robust our leisure market is specifically, and Tees Valley, like many other areas, has been very successful. We've got some fabulous places for people to go and visit, depending on the types of things, and I think the whole push of our marketing this year has been about get out there and go do your thing, as we call it, and it's been very successful. So we're very pleased with that. We've done that on the basis of value as well. So we've had some really good keen prices, some great destinations. We've worked collaboratively across the network with destinations and through TfN officers who've helped us to build those bridges and build partnerships, and we'll continue to do that, to reach outwards to support your economies.
Thank you, and that's reassuring that obviously the information you have is the same as ours. TPE, Darren, the comments that I have really to do with the timetable for particularly May 2022, the inclusion of the extension to Saltburn, can we have some clarification as whether that still will be delivered? And secondly, we've still got kind of differing information about the 3 services per hour via Darlington. I think that it is in the plan as far as we're aware, but I think the last time there was a conversation, I think it was said that TPE didn't think that they could achieve that. So if I could just highlight that, and maybe if you can give us some clarification on that.
Yeah, so Councillor Scott, so in terms of the Saltburn service, that is in our proposals to call it Saltburn in the peaks from May 22, but we've still to go through the business plan process with RNP and get that formally approved, but that's certainly in our proposals.
Lovely, thanks for that, Darren. Andy, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair, and thanks for the updates. I mean, from our perspective, although we certainly recognise the strong leisure market that Mark was referring to, I think the feeling here would be that performance overall is mixed, for the reasons I think Darren gave. Obviously, there was the cancellations at the weekend, but obviously, I suppose the weather has played a role. We will always probably face a bit more disruption because of the infrastructure congestion, the congestion caused by infrastructure. The specific I'd like to raise, Liam, I could actually. There's a couple. The first one is on that issue of cancellations that we're seeing. I just want to know, under the new contracts that operators have, how are operators penalised for cancellations? Because we don't want to get back into a world where there just seems to be a sort of sense of this stuff can happen without any consequences, which is where we were. The board will remember, the committee will remember, and I think we need to understand what are the consequences. We can't just have services cancelled, willy-nilly, particularly at weekends, and then a sense that there aren't consequences for that. So it'd be good to know what that position is. Just a specific then, Chair, if I might, and this is probably one for Darren, and it relates to the proposal that I think TPE are making to swap services in the December 22 timetable. So I think that they're intending to swap Liverpool to Scarborough and Piccadilly to Hull, with Liverpool to Hull and Piccadilly to Scarborough. They're proposing to switch those services. We believe that presents the opportunity to reintroduce 2 trains per hour all day at Greenfield and Mosley, so stations between Stalybridge and Huddersfield. And I think our analysis, we're pretty confident that can be done. Now, they are key commuter places for us, and certainly residents in Greenfield have mounted a very, very kind of strong and justified campaign for 2 trains, per hour on that important line. So I'm looking for a commitment today, Darren, and hopefully via the timetable process, that we can have those all day 2 trains per hour, and perhaps as early as possible. But I'm guessing that would be May 23, given that some time will be needed to just see how the 2022 timetable is bedded down. But I want a commitment today that we will have 2 trains all day, Stalybridge to Huddersfield, as soon as possible. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Andy. Can I suggest that Gary perhaps answers the question about penalty clauses first, and then we'll bring Darren in to answer the specifics about the potential for Stalybridge and Greenfield. So, Gary, do you want to come in on the contractuals first?
Sure, yeah. So both or each of the 3 different types of performance that we're used to, cancellations and short formations, are still covered inside the new form of contract, and they feed through to the bonuses that or the performance payments, apologies, that the operators can expect to receive. They also have attached to them remedial plan provisions and so forth. Northern's is slightly different because it's a service agreement, because we're dealing with the operator last resort, and there's sort of less purpose in purporting to fine yourself effectively. But it's one of the areas that we're looking at for the contract change that we'll have with Northern in March of next year, when their original service agreement comes to an end, and we're putting in place an extended direct award effectively with Northern, during which we're looking to zero in on just that. How do we replicate in our relationship with Northern, without just creating a money go round, the ability to come back to yourselves and say, this level of performance has triggered this level of response. I mean, what I'll happily do is take an action away, because that's a fairly poor description. I know I'll take an action away for your officers and turn yourselves to just describe exactly how those work just now, and your officers will be involved in our crafting of the follow-on contract to Northern in any event, which will start alongside the business plan. Really, as soon as we get the business plan in, we will be in a position to start to share stuff back out with Northern. So I'll take that away quite happily.
Lovely, thanks, Gary. Darren, do you want to come in on the specifics of Stalybridge and Greenfield?
Sorry, just coming off mute. So I was just going to say this is an early obviously proposition, and we're still discussing this with RNP and with Transport for the North, and obviously it does need to go through the timetable consultation process that you mentioned, Andy. But I'll certainly take that feedback back into the business, and if there's anything that you can share in terms of the work that you've done on that with us, then I can feed that into our service planning team. definitely want to introduce a service that's attractive to all customers. But I'm not a service planning expert, so I don't want to say yes categorically we can put those calls in. I think we need to go through the due consultation process, and it's just to point out, it's not May 22, it's December 22 at the earliest.
Sorry, Chair, if I could just briefly come back. Sorry I understand. Sorry, I must be my slip there. I understand that the kind of important point is making sure December 22 lands properly, and so I think I was referring to May 23. Sorry if that wasn't clear. So just to follow on very quickly, Chair, we are going to formally submit this proposal as part of our response to the consultation, and we will put that evidence in that. But Darren, I will make sure that you get that from the TFGM team directly, so that we can open up hopefully a dialogue about that and see if we can fix what has been a thorny issue for quite a long time. But thanks for your response. Back to you, Chair.
Excellent. Thanks, Andy. Jamie and Susan. So, Jamie, do you want to go next?
Thank you, Liam. Just briefly with Darren, it's good to see TPE numbers and other numbers increasing in the North East. One of the challenges that we all face is, though, connecting rural areas, Northumberland. And one of the challenges I know that you have is the train pathways to get those TPE trains to stop in Northumberland. I know you want to do that, but the lack of capacity on the line, and there's nothing in the ARP that says it's going to improve, means that places like Cramlington, with a large population, you can't even stop trains there because there's not the pathways. So just an offer to work together on the lobbying for that, because I know from previous conversations with TPE that you want to do that. So let's pick that up, work with our officer team, Transport North East, and we'll get some lobbying in to get the extra pathways so that we can all have a better service.
No, thank you for that, Mayor Driscoll. And should point out that one of the new services in the current timetable does call at Cramlington in the peak. So I agree. We've got to work to get those extra calls included as well. So but by all means, reach out offline.
Lovely, thanks, Darren and Susan.
Thanks, Chair. Andy's issue about Greenfield and Musley is the same as ours at the other side of the border, Slough and Marsden. So just to add that into the question that you posed as well. You mentioned, it's actually been mentioned a few times during the conversation that recovery is proving to be faster here in the north than it is in other parts of the country. I just think we need to make that case really strongly to government when it comes to subsidy and making sure that we get the rail services that people need, because there's obviously a lot of latent demand there that is not being fulfilled, which brings me on to my next point, which is about the May 22 timetable based on December 21 services in 4.2. Now, for us, this means that the Huddersfield, Wakefield, Castleford service is now going to be at it's about 3 a day now, as opposed to 1 an hour, which it was pre-pandemic, just because it's based on that timetable. Now, that December 21 figure, that was not really a proper timetable, was it? It's just because of pandemic that it's changed in the way it has. So I'd just like to ask about what we're going to do to review that going forward, because as I say, that corridor, it's only been operational a couple of years. It's not really had a chance to establish itself, and I wouldn't like us to accept December 21 as the ideal timetable point, because it's not, and we need to be able to change that, because as I said, there's a lot of latent demand that at the moment we're just not touching, because we're not getting the whole network financed to the right level to actually provide the service that people need and want. And I think the only other thing I've mentioned, a practical point really, Chair, is about the SQR. Can we just see what's in it, and can we see what's being reported through that, so we've got some idea of quality services in our region? Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. No, that's great, Susan. Gary, are you best placed to kind of answer the points about the December 21 timetable and also the SQR information?
Yeah, so in reverse order, SQR, absolutely. I'm sure we'll use the officer reference group probably in the first instance to bring that forward, Councillor Hinchcliffe, and then we can once we work out how best to report it, we can add it to the performance report, because it's certainly when I reported these things in Scotland with ScotRail, hard and soft performance, as they're called, timetable performance and performance and cleanliness and stuff are normally wrapped up as the passenger experience. So I'm sure we can do that. Hopefully for next time if we have results that are in a position ready for sharing. In respect to the timetable, what both operators have been told in the context of the business planning process that yes, indeed, the norm across the industry is intended to be that the timetable that's now in place will be the base. I think last time we addressed this in one of our calls, I noted that that's actually easier said than done for us because of things like Manchester Recovery Task Force and Transpennine route upgrade and so forth. So that I know that what each of the operators will do in coming back to us is show what the attending costs and benefits and difficulty of unpicking the plans that they have will be, and that will be part of the consideration that we walk through with yourselves, because some things in theory could lift out and wouldn't be too painful, and others are absolutely intrinsic to what we expect to do next, and so we would perhaps choose not to do other things ahead of not reintroduce those services. So that will be part of the conversation that we need to have at whatever point today the two business plans arrive with me. I don't have them in hand at the moment, Liam, but I expect that sometime before 2 o'clock tomorrow morning, that will still be counted as today, they will arrive in the inbox and we'll start to work through them. But we have we've got that very much in mind, Councillor Hinchcliffe, that I can't actually speak for all the other markets elsewhere in the country, but for us there is a lot that we had in train that we've been discussing publicly that we need to work through alongside our current offering in order to make the timetable that we expect to move to next.
Okay, thanks for that, Gary. I know Andy's sort of indicating as well. I'll bring him in shortly, and obviously we're going to be discussing the business planning process later on in the agenda in the private session. But I think Susan's hit on some vital points there that need to be said in the public session. Absolutely, first and foremost, as Mark had said about the bounce back in recovery and passenger numbers in the north being 10% stronger than other parts of the country, we shouldn't be facing the resource cuts that the government is intimating at, and I'd hope the operators would join us hand in hand to make all those arguments back to government that we'd actually need more resource for the North of England's railway, not less. And you can't square the circle of climate emergency if you're going to be cutting investment in the rail network. I think the other aspect as well, as Susan sort of quite rightfully raised, is about the December 21 timetable being a new baseline. In simple terms, the December 21 timetable is effectively a compromise of what's the most efficient way of running the railway during a pandemic. So for emergency reasons, it's the right thing to do, but it shouldn't be a new normal. And I don't think any of us in this process, as effectively being joint partners, as the Rail North process is, would accept that kind of base timetable. I think we would want to have very strong influence over what the kind of new timetables will look like. Yes, people's travel patterns have changed because of COVID, but we would want to be kind of equal partners in determining what kind of services look like in the future, not just having these things served up as a fait accompli. I'm going to bring Andy in because Andy's indicating as well. So Andy, over to you.
It's a brief one, Chair, but it does actually follow on from what you said. It was something that worried me slightly in the figures, and it's about the sort of financing of recovery. I saw in Northern's figures that while they've recovered 77% of demand, so I guess that means 77% of passengers, they're recovering 88% of revenue, which makes me wonder, how is that being achieved? It feels like people are paying more for tickets, or anyway, it was something that worried me slightly, and I'd just be grateful for an explanation. Chair, can I just say as well, as soon as I've had the answer to that, I need to pop away for 10 minutes, but obviously I want to make a substantial contribution to the next item. So if I disappear for a minute, don't worry. I'm coming back as soon as I can, but just wanted to have a clarification on that revenue point, if that's possible. Thank you.
No, that's absolutely fine. Thanks, Andy. Mark, can you come back on that?
Yeah, certainly. The difference in that mix is because obviously season ticket and commuting traffic is a lot less than it was, which season tickets are heavily discounted. Just bear in mind that in Northern the volumes are very high, but the yield of a ticket is circa just £3.90 to £4.10. So it's high volume, low yield. And if you take the yield from a season ticket, which is significantly less than that, that's why revenue's gone up at a faster rate than demand.
Okay, lovely. Thanks for that, Mark.
Does that make the case for more flexible ticketing, though, Chair? You know, that should we not offer people less weeklies and monthlies and the ability to buy bunches of tickets but use them when they need them, given the changed reality post-pandemic?
I'm happy to come in on that, Chair, if you wish.
Of course, Mark.
We, as Darren said, we launched the industry launched a flexi season ticket, Andy, but when the recovery started, and it's now representing between 10 and 15% of the season ticket mix. I don't think we've given it a full charge yet because the market is so volatile. But the industry and indeed Northern and TB, we're very committed to creating more flexible tickets that meet the new normal and the new demand.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. And I think equally, Andy, with that kind of approach that we discussed previously around rail reform, it's that type of issue that we want more devolved power over, so we can actually put in place a fares and ticketing strategy that gives the best deal to all of our public and actually attract someone to public transport as the first choice rather than the last resort, as sometimes it can be. I'm conscious that we spent quite a bit of time there, so I'm not going to repeat anything that's said, other than just to sort of thank Northern for the Boxing Day service we're going to have between Liverpool and St Helens, because also we've got Merseyrail running a service. Actually, we believe that we're the first city region in decades to have all of our lines, whether it's the Wirral line, the Northern line, or the City lines, as we call it, out of Lime Street, having a railway service on Boxing Day. And we hope what's being pioneered in the Liverpool City region this Boxing Day, engineering works notwithstanding, could become modus operandi right across the north of England on Boxing Days into the future. So we'd kind of put on record our thanks for that and look forward to that happening in future years as well. Okay, if we can note all of that report accordingly. David, do you want to come in briefly?
Just to say, Chair, we do have Matt Rice from Network Rail on the call now. I didn't pick up any specific questions for Network Rail that would need to be directed to Matt, but just didn't want to kind of let the item pass without noting Network Rail are here if there was anything.
No, and that's a fair enough point, and I'm conscious of time. We are sort of slightly behind where I was hoping for us to be, so I don't think there's anything urgent we need to sort of raise with Network Rail, but obviously thanks for their attendance. Should we move on to item number 6 then, if we're noting item number 5, and I'm not seeing any dissent to that. So item number 6 is the Manchester Recovery Task Force. David, do you want to briefly introduce? And I'm conscious Andy does want to kind of contribute, so if he's still with us, I'll try and bring him in first after you've done a brief intro.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I think obviously this is something of a standing item now, given the discussions we've had previously. So essentially this paper is an update on progress on two fronts, really, the December 22 timetable planning and the infrastructure and rail map side of things. We are now in a much stronger collaboration, thanks to the work you did over the summer with the department and with Network Rail. I know you had one of the regular meetings with the Rail Minister recently, which was very, very productive. So we're working through that now in that collaboration. The timetable consultation, as referred in the report, is open. That goes until the 31st of December. Just to note that the consulted timetable does include changes that you've helped bring about, including some early and late Sheffield to airport direct services and some cross Warrington services. Of course, both of those don't give everything we want, but it's an important movement from the previous version of the timetable. So the outcome of that consultation, when it closes, will be reported through to committee members. I think just to highlight, though, it's not a consultation on the structure of the timetable, which was the first part, but it's on the detail and the calling patterns. So essentially, it will be for the train operators to respond to the points that come across in the consultation and tweak the timetable where they can before they actually put that into the system formally. But we'll certainly report on the consultation feedback and the actions that the operators are taking. The rail map was then the key thing that you helped secure over the summer. We're now calling that, incidentally, a Manchester Rail blueprint rather than a rail map, but it's the same device. It's about showing how the infrastructure improvements, either committed or in the pipeline, in development, at an early stage of development, would link to future service changes and service improvements back towards the levels of connectivity we had previously. That blueprint is now owned by the task force, which is the combined group of operators, Network Rail Department, ourselves. We're represented alongside TFGM. So that has got broader ownership now. They are consulting on the development of that. We've had a couple of direct one-to-one meetings with members of the committee. We have more planned, and there's more ability to schedule more meetings if anybody wants one that hasn't got one yet, to make sure we capture the things that you want to see in the development of that blueprint. That will be completed as a first version, a full and first version, by the end of March. That will be reported to the March committee. So we'll make sure that keeps on track, and the task force produce that, and you get to see that in March. It will be updated regularly because it's intended to be a living document. So, as I said, there'll be things in there that are not yet committed schemes. As and when they move through the approval process and get further commitments behind them, then we would expect the blueprint to be updated to reflect the greater certainty. Key thing, I think, from the committee point of view is this is going to identify timetable change opportunity points where we will bring in a timely way, possibly 2 years before timetable change, the opportunities to develop and enhance timetables, the choices and trade-offs. So do you want more direct connectivity versus performance? And that will depend how the base timetable performs, but bring you all the evidence and stats and information to make an informed choice at the right time. And that's one of the key purposes of that blueprint tool. On the infrastructure side, there's a lot of progress on the timetable, the infrastructure support, the December 22 timetable. That's in place. There's funding for that. There is £26 million now allocated to the development of what's called Tranche 1 infrastructure. That includes some important schemes like longer platforms at Manchester Airport and turnbacks around the Warrington area, which would help facilitate better cross-Warrington services in the future, which has obviously been a major issue. There is some good industry consensus now on the right scheme for Oxford Road Station, which is part of the major bottleneck on the Castlefield corridor, and that should be able to go into design early next year. And as you know, TfN's commissioned work around the performance benefits of Platform 1516. That should be available to share very shortly. So progress on the timetable and infrastructure there. This will be a standing item. We're asking really for this to be noted today, and happy to take any points or questions.
Lovely, thanks, David. Andy, do you want to come in if you're still with us at the moment? I don't know if Andy's had to duck out.
Looks like he might have ducked out. As suggested.
Is there anything, Dan? I'll defer to you. You can come in.
Thanks very much, Chair. I think really useful update from David, and I'm grateful for it. I think it is necessary just to remind people of the context of all of this. You know, we find ourselves in what is undoubtedly a suboptimal position, and that is as a consequence of a protracted period of underinvestment in our railway network in the north of England. This is not a conversation that a Transport for the South type body would be having, because it would have been sorted years ago. So in a very sensible business-like way, as leaders across the north, we are trying to make the best of what is frankly quite a bad situation. But I do think it's necessary to continue to make the point that we do require a sustained period of investment from national government. I'm afraid the integrated rail plan and the lack of commitment to Northern Powerhouse Rail will not give us what we need to put these things right. Turning to the practicalities, though, of making the best of it, I do welcome the £26 million of investment. That is useful. What I need to see from a South Yorkshire perspective is a reinstatement of the direct train connection between Sheffield and Manchester Airport. The loss of that service is very, very significant for businesses, for our universities, and for the wider city region. And further to that is the clarity about the ability of the upgrade of the Hope Valley line to accommodate a third fast train. That was the original intention of the upgrade in the first place. And the work of the Recovery Task Force, or the blueprint, whatever we're calling it now, has called that into question. It is a vital transport link between the two great cities of Sheffield and Manchester, and I do continue to seek assurances that we'll be able to accommodate that third fast train on that Hope Valley line. But those are all the points. Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. David, do you want to come back, and then I'll bring Andy straight in?
Yeah, I can confirm in the discussions with the task force that those will both be absolutely baked in as key outputs that we want to see, and then obviously they will then link those to infrastructure works that are needed and the sort of trade-offs that might occur at the time, because there might be different options and different ways of doing things. But in terms of logging that as something TFN and South Yorkshire in particular want to see, then yes, I can say the task force absolutely got that in mind.
Brilliant, thank you, David. Andy?
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. So this is obviously a difficult position, given that the proposals for the December 22 timetable, Chair, continually seem to change and move around. And the latest information I have is that we're going to lose some weekend services in the latest proposal that's coming forward. And we were talking before, weren't we, about the importance of the leisure market and how important that is, particularly to Manchester. It's very, very frustrating that we just have this moving picture that seems to get worse, and we're not happy, I guess. Nor is anybody, particularly towards Marple. There seems to be a kind of a proposed service cut in that area, Rose Hill Marple. And we believe that's going below minimum acceptable levels. There are particularly educational flows on that line, and we've been trying to reinstate services there, and again, it feels like we're going backwards in that area. So this is it's a frustrating position, but I guess we're all in that chair. So my point is to come back to infrastructure, because we're being asked here to accept a much reduced service without any exit route, and I can't do that. I'm not prepared actually to do that, and that's the position that this committee has been pretty clear about. So if we cast our minds back, to 2014, when we were promised an expanded timetable for the north, we are in completely the opposite position here at the moment, where we are looking at a period of managed decline on the railways of the north of England, with no end in sight. It would just be going on who knows how long, given the way these things are done. Now, we'd asked for a timetable, Chair. You remember, we made it a very clear call, didn't we, when we asked for the special meeting with the Minister on this issue. And it feels to me we're being fobbed off on infrastructure. When you set it alongside the integrated rail plan, I think Dan Jarvis was saying something similar when I came back onto the call. It's not an acceptable picture. Everywhere we look, we are seeing a reduction in what we were promised, a failure to deliver on what we were promised, and in effect, this committee and TFN main board is being asked to almost endorse a period of managed decline on the railways of the north, which is the exact opposite of what we were promised. Now, Chair, I want to come back to this point about a timetable for the infrastructure improvements. Now, we know there's work been going on, but all we have in the paper is vague references to the work on platforms 15 and 16. Let's be clear about what that work is saying, because there's no point. Why are we kept in the dark about it? That work is saying as I understand it, that platforms 15 and 16, as we have always maintained, can make a substantial difference and form a big part of the solution to the bottleneck that is city centre Manchester. But it also probably needs the other infrastructure capacity improvements around Stockport and around other places on the system. So we need it all if we're going to get a proper solution here. But that's what we've always kind of said. If you go back to the Ordsall Cord, there was a Northern Hub scheme going back many years ago, and it was the kind of salami slicing of that scheme has left us in this position. It was always the case that all of it was going to be needed. So I want to make it clear today, Chair, that I am not prepared to give any form of endorsement to the new timetable without the parallel timetable for the delivery of infrastructure that will solve our problem. We're not going to get what we want in the long term on the IRP, are we? So that's a debate for another day. But also we're being told we can't have a basic level of infrastructure just to run our services in the next, let's say, 10 to 20 years. And that for me really isn't acceptable. So I want to just make this clear today that actually, on behalf of Greater Manchester, I will be formally objecting to the new timetable unless there is a firm plan for all of the infrastructure improvements that will then give an end date to this new timetable. And I just want to make that absolutely clear. That's the first condition. The second is, Chair, if we sign this off, we all know what the reality will be for, I would say at least 5 years, more like 10 years on rail services across the north, particularly between Manchester and Leeds. It will mean people unable to find a seat because we've got reduced number of services. As we've heard today, there's strong demand for rail in this area, but we will not have the capacity to meet the demand. And what will that mean? It will mean what many of us experience when we go to TfN meetings in Leeds, standing up all the way back to Manchester. And that will just be the reality for people for years and years and years to come. So the second condition I would want to put down on this is that until we get back to the expanded timetable we promised, that trains should be declassified. I can't see a justification for first-class compartments on trains where people can't get a seat when they're paying the ticket prices at the level that they are. So I just say I'm fed up of being fobbed off on this issue. The industry has not been able to give us a clear answer as to when this capacity will be put in place. Dan pointed to the 26 million. It's something, but 26 million goes nowhere near dealing with what we need. We're hearing in the media that electrification is being cut back left, right and centre. We would be making a fundamental mistake, I think, as a committee, were we to give any sort of even reluctant endorsement to the timetable without a plan for infrastructure. And I want to just make it clear, I will be formally objecting to the new timetable without the plan for infrastructure. And secondly, I believe we need to see the declassification of those trains that have first-class accommodation, because otherwise we are just saying that it's okay for our residents to pay, a large amount for their tickets and then to stand up all the way on their journeys. And that to me isn't acceptable either. And if that makes the industry sit up and take notice, then so be it. Thanks very much, Chair.
No, lovely. Thanks, Andy. I don't know if Martin, do you want to come back in, or David on the specifics of those points?
If I can, Chair, I think I'd just respond with the blueprint is, intended to be the vehicle for showing that clarity that Andy has requested. So let us bring that to you. Take those strong messages back to industry, back to the department, and see how close that blueprint can get to what you need to see.
Thank you, David. But I think if I could just say that this needs to be done Chair, sorry to come back in, but it needs to be done together, doesn't it? You know, we can't. We're running this consultation on the timetable till when? End of December.
Yeah.
I think finally, when the final proposal comes back, I guess, to this committee in January for the December 22 timetable, we need to have the best offer on infrastructure at that point in time. And then at that point, I think it's legitimate for this committee to say, are we accepting an unending period of managed decline, or are we saying, no, there needs to be a better timetable for the infrastructure? And I would personally appreciate it, Chair, if we could ensure that there's an alignment of those two things, that we require when we're asked to consider the final timetable, what is the final proposal for infrastructure in the next decade at that same point, so that we can make the judgment. Residents, I think, would expect nothing less of us, to be honest.
No, it's very practical. And just to check, David, have we got a meeting in January? I've not got the calendar in front of me. And if we've not, can we then lift it up to the board meeting, because there is a board meeting in January?
I was going to suggest, Chair, we've got the board meeting. In fact, we're going to make that point on the next paper on investment generally, that there are a number of issues, particularly where it relates to statutory advice, that would need to go through the board anyway. So we do have a board meeting in January, so that would fit quite well.
Yeah, and in terms of the kind of point about declassification of services, that I think is actually very practical as a suggestion from Andy. I appreciate it might not be popular in certain circles of the industry, but can we kind of investigate the potential around that and have that as part of that reporting back in January as well?
I think probably, Chair, pick that up as part of the business planning process as well, in terms of the revenue side of that. So, but yeah, let's pick that up.
Susan, do you want to come in?
Thanks. Yeah, just following from Andy's point, really. I mean, some people will be able to find a seat, but also some people will be able to find a train. Because if you think, Bradford still haven't got a direct service to Manchester Airport, which is what we've been promised for many years. And I noticed in 3.13 it talks about the future timetable for the Manchester area, but can we remember that obviously it reaches beyond Manchester, of course, onto the other side of the Pennines, and we also want to get to Manchester as quickly as possible to obviate people going on the motorway, which is what they do at the moment to Manchester Airport, which is obviously not great for our carbon commitments, is it? So some indication about how future service priorities will be organised really in the future timetable, and whether you can make sure the wider north of England is considered as part of that. I know Sheffield has had issues about this as well, but West Yorkshire certainly would like to have better links to Manchester, and I want to make sure that any timetable changes fully take that into account.
Yeah, absolutely. David, do you need to come back on that point, or is that pretty much as read?
I think that sort of thing we'll pick up as part of the blueprint anyway.
Okay. I'm very conscious of time. Heather's indicated, so I'll bring Heather in. And I also appreciate that Karen Shaw, who's deputising for the Cheshire authorities, has put a detailed question about a service from Knutsford into Manchester in the chat. So if I can ask officers to pick that up and go directly back to Craig and Karen about that point as well. But Heather?
Well, yes, I mean, I hear what Andy's saying, but again, I would just remind people we have the same problem, certainly as far as the East Coast Main Line is concerned and timetables. And I appreciate you've got the blueprint for Manchester, but this is something that we are raising, and I think we need a blueprint for the East Coast Main Line area, and that's something that I would be raising. We've all got the same problems that you have, Andy. We are concerned about the timetables and the effect that it certainly does have, and I'm sure Jamie will support what I'm saying as well. We are extremely concerned. So while we support you, we'll be looking for your support for what we want to do as far as our side of the country is concerned.
Okay, thanks for that, Heather. I could see Andy's indicating, but I think as a united North, we've always supported one another, and that's what we want to do. And this is a kind of result of decades of underinvestment in our part of the country. And I know we're going to touch on that point you make specifically, Heather, in the next item. Andy, I'll give you the very final last word on this, and then we'll move on to item 7.
Yeah, I wouldn't want there to be any, any sense that I don't fully support you, Heather, in wanting those improvements for your side of the country as well. Of course, I do. But I also think we need to remember how we are in this position, and we're in this position because this was a root cause analysis of the chaos in May 2018, wasn't it? And this part of Manchester is what causes the disruption in the northeast. It's what causes the disruption in Liverpool. It's what causes the disruption everywhere, because trains can simply not get through this bottleneck. And I think, Chair, it's one of the only pieces of officially designated congested infrastructure on the rail network. We would argue that Stockport probably could be included that, but never mind. That is why it's in a different category. And I'm not saying it's because it doesn't please us to have it in a different category. We don't necessarily want to have this disruption that will come within putting in this new capacity, but this is the North's problem as a whole, and that's why it's not us making special pleading and expecting everybody to join in with us. It's because this problem causes everyone's problem, and I just think it's important that that point is made as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks for that, Andy. And if we note that on all the points and the actions we've asked Martin and David to bring back in January, that would be great. Let's move on to item number 7 then, which is investment planning. And Chris is going to take us through this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As members will have seen, there are 3 key topics in the paper here. Firstly, an update on the East Coast Main Line, service options and associated infrastructure changes, particularly in relation to delivering 7 trains an hour north of Northallerton, and with a greater emphasis on east-west connectivity. It also refers to the impact of proposals in the IRP for infrastructure upgrades to be delivered, and it also refers to TfN's proposal for a rail map, or blueprint as we're now calling it, as David has identified earlier as well, which I hope that Councillor Scott will be pleased to see, and we will be pushing for that to be established for the East Coast, because it does seem like the right kind of thing to be doing, where you have these rather complex series of infrastructure changes, and that they need to be linked to the services that we all want to see. The second issue in the report there is on Leeds capacity issues. Leeds is an interesting one in this context. It highlights the existing and future congestion issues and constraints in the area as well, and particularly that when you look at all the different delays in the Leeds area, it's about the 3rd worst area in the country, certainly in the north, for delay minutes. It highlights the positive reception by DfT in the industry to the case that was presented by TfN jointly with WICA for broader consideration and development. There's obviously a lot of work going on at Leeds at the moment, and has been since 2000 realistically. My take on what's going on there is that we're doing fairly minor updates now. There's slight amendments to platform lengths. There's slight amendments to platform widths and so forth. And when you look at the bigger picture of all the proposals for development, and particularly proposals to link employment to residential areas, that all needs to be taken into account. And we've made the case that DfT have accepted, it's been reflected in the IRP, which is good to note, that a broader piece of work needs to be undertaken. The IRP mandates Network Rail to lead that. So we now must make sure that we work with Network Rail such that that piece of work addresses the reliability and connectivity challenges, such as better services from London to Bradford, because that's what's needed to make that happen. The final element in there is a reference to the Rail Network Enhancements Pipeline, the RNEP as we refer to it, which is the mechanism by which DfT fund enhancements and upgrades. In the report, we say that a verbal update will be provided. And the headline message as of today is that there's still no final decision on the RNEP programme. It hasn't been published by DfT yet. They tell us that they are currently reviewing funding priorities within their CSR settlement, and looking at the impact on rail infrastructure schemes. They've told us that exercise is expected to be completed very soon. We have heard that for a short while now. When we get that, the report advises that we need to undertake an analysis of it, review it, compare that to the northern priorities, particularly the investment priorities in our strategic transport plan, and then we will engage with DfT on the contents of that programme and influence it as best we can. The 3 recommendations basically are asking for progress to be noted.
Lovely, thanks for that. Chris, I've got Jamie first, and I'm sure there might be 1 or 2 others. So Jamie.
Thank you, Liam. Thanks for the update, Chris. I a week or two ago, a train down to London, and I got there from Newcastle in 2.5 hours. That's a good 25 minutes faster than apparently the fastest time. Now, it happened because at the time I was going, it was a quiet time. It was an early morning one. That shows the issue in the IRP when it's notably IRP is full of lots of coulds and possibilities and being explored. The Northeast does not need to be explored. This is not deepest, darkest Peru where Paddington Bear is going to emerge from the jungle. We know what's needed. We had this infrastructure in the 1840s. Now, the problem is, and the IRP acknowledges this, it's subject to stopping patterns. If all the trains run at the same speed and stop at the same stations, you can get loads of trains up there. So this idea that we'll have a look at this, we'll have a look at that, we might get 7 trains an hour through. Previous studies have said that only works. We're going to be trapped in these same discussions of, well, you can't run that train from Liverpool to Edinburgh because if you stop at the places where people actually want to get on and use the service, you're going to slow down the big trains coming from London to Edinburgh. And these are the problems. East-west connectivity is the same as north-south connectivity for us. They all run on the same infrastructure. So one of the problems in the IRP is that it didn't take into account the fact that the metro is part of the rail system, just because it's not heavy rail. You know, Liam, it's very good that the Liverpool City region is making these strides and running services on Boxing Day. Of course, the Tyne-Wear Metro has been running services on Boxing Day as far back as I can remember, you know, because it's a local devolved service, we've had the ability to do that. If we start to look at things like the Tyne-Wear Metro and other services as part of the same system, then we'll start to see the business case for things like reopening the Leamside line change radically, because the travelling public don't really care what colour the train is when they get on it. They just want to know, can they go from A to B and, frankly, get the same ticket all the way through. And while we're on the subject of infrastructure, stations, of course, are key infrastructure, and stations only work if you have staff there to operate them. And it's notable that the LNER proposal, LNER run the stations, are going to reduce 23 hours a week of station staffing in Newcastle, a major national railway station, 43 3/4 hours a week in Berwick. People rely on stations being staffed, particularly people who want to change their tickets. I'm sure everyone here has had to do that. You know, the advanced ticket, you've got to go and you get it changed if you want to change it. You can only do that if you're there. And it's so complicated sometimes knowing which train you can use at which time that you need expert advice. And there's a lot of people aren't on the internet. And then there's the issue of security at stations, particularly late at night. People will feel safer. We'll get more people on the trains. So that's important. So this approach for the phrase used is rail map, something akin to the task force in Manchester to sort out the East Coast Main Line, because this has been a mess for a long, long time. Dan's absolutely right, and everybody else. This is the result of decades of persistent underinvestment. And the problem always is, someone says, oh, well, which little silo shall we put it in? It doesn't belong in a silo. It's a system-wide problem. We've got to deal with it as such. So I'm absolutely behind this. Totally support what Heather said. And I'm speaking to Martin Gannon, and I know he totally supports it. So let's do this. Let's get political representation on it, working with all the partners, and actually get this problem solved and recognise that it's an integrated system.
Excellent, thanks, Jamie. I kind of wholeheartedly support everything that you've said there. I particularly love your badge, by the way. You're making a really sort of strong point about the fact that the north of England does not have enough staffed stations anyway, and we certainly should be pushing back very, very strongly about anything that reduces staffing hours at stations or takes staff off stations completely, because we know how vital that is for the travelling public. So, yeah, very much strongly support everything that you just said there. Chris, do you want to come back in on the points that Jamie's just raised?
Yes, a couple of things there stood out really. Firstly, in terms of the fast services and the infrastructure that's required to support it, absolutely. And I think the IRP does actually refer to 4-tracking north of North Hallam, which is one of the ways you separate fast and slow services. So I think that brings you back to the blueprint as well, absolutely. As you know, we need to understand what infrastructure is required to deliver what services, and then we can pursue government to actually deliver these things and give us the funding to do it. So that's a key part of it. The other thing I just wanted to come back on was the point about the metro being part of the whole transport system. Completely agree with that. And that's one of the reasons why we got together with Wyker in West Yorkshire, because the missing piece of the jigsaw in terms of Leeds Station and the area is actually the proposal for the mass transit system. We wanted to make sure the industry was joined up with the proposal for mass transit and how that integrated with the rail network. So yeah, totally understand that the metro is part of the overall system, and part of what I'm trying to do is to make sure there's connections made by Network Rail in the industry.
Lovely, thanks, Chris. I've got 3 more contributions, and then we will have to move on in the interest of time. So Heather, then Susan, then Darren. So Heather.
Thank you. It's just a comment really that Tees Valley, nobody from the Tees Valley Combined Authority have been involved in with the Atkins report. I just wonder, when we're actually going to be part of that. I think this has been raised on behalf of the officers, and just to support what Jamie's saying about LNER and staffing at stations, particularly affecting the smaller stations within the Tees Valley area. I think certainly we need some more information on that. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks for that, Heather, and obviously David and Chris, if we can rectify that sort of issue of Tees Valley involvement in those studies.
We've said all lead officers will get sight of that work once it's completed, which will be very shortly.
Lovely. Okay, Susan.
Thanks. Just briefly from me, Chair. I think it's a good update paper, and I just wanted to say really pleased to be having those constructive conversations with Network Rail, TfN, etc. About the London services for Bradford, so that finally, I'm hoping some short time in the future, we'll be able to get the promises that were given to Bradford in 2014 fulfilled. So thank you for that.
Lovely, thanks, Susan. And Darren.
I won't make it a Christmas quiz question, but you know what I'm going to say, don't you? In terms of Hull, I'm a bit disappointed we're only mentioned in brackets in one paragraph and one word akin to Leeds, but I will hang it on Leeds. If you're serious about capacity and modal movement around Leeds, as I've said many times on this call before, most of our commuter towns in the East Riding, outside of Hull, in the next authority along, look to Leeds. They don't look, some of them look to Hull, some of them look to Leeds. So without that electrification, without a commitment to that electrification, at some point the trains won't be able to run from Hull to Leeds, because they're not going to be bimodal, and if they are, we'll get the rubbishy rolling stock. So if we're serious about integrated transport, is what Susan said about looking at a Yorkshire solution. It has to be, for it to work, it has to be seen to work for all of Yorkshire, not just part of Yorkshire. So I know we went from being probably the quickest boots in the ground option on the TfN IRP to being not even in the government's IRP, but I would hope that we do bang the drum and continue to press the case for a rail improvement for those non-electrified parts of the connectivity into Leeds, which is from Hull. And I'm not happy that it's sort of just always not passed over in the report, actually.
No, that's a very fair point, Darren. I don't know if Chris or anyone wants to briefly come back on a bit more detail for Hull.
I think, Chair, just say when the RNEP comes out, that was intended to be an opportunity to paint a more comprehensive picture across the whole of the north. So let's do it as part of that update and make sure we cover every bit of the north.
Brilliant. No, thanks for that, David. Obviously, if we can move the recommendations there, and I'll suggest if actually we can elevate this to the board in January to allow Martin as Chief Executive to potentially kind of exercise his role of statutory advice to government about how we want a rail blueprint approach, particularly for the East Coast Main Line. I would also suggest for the issues around Leeds, but as a principle for any of those kind of bottleneck locations across the North's rail network. I think that's a really important way of working. into the future. So if we can agree all of those things accordingly, and I'm not seeing any dissent, and that'll give us just shy of half an hour to deal with the last item. Obviously, item 8, I have to move the relevant exclusion of press and public. Before we do that, for anyone watching at home, it is appropriate just to kind of wish everyone a very healthy, happy and safe Christmas and New Year period. So wishing all those people at home or wherever they happen to be the very, very best for the festive period. But if we can move the relevant clause of the Local Government Act 1972, we can then move into the private session. So if that's agreed, and if you can let me know when we've